How many of you believe that fairy tales affect your life? Okay. How many men believe that fairy tales affect themselves becoming men? Okay. Not that many. I'm going to tell you a story today, and it's a story you've heard. And it's a story about how boys become men. The story is Jack and the Beanstalk. And typically where we pick up Jack and the Beanstalk is far later than when it actually starts. When it starts, Jack is about 2 or 3 years old, and his father's a great king. And one day a giant appears in the kingdom. And the giant says to the king, "King, let me learn of your wisdom." Now the king has pulled up the drawbridge, has guards in the tower, and says to him, no, you're a giant. You come in here, you're going to kill everybody, you're going to destroy the place. This is not good. So the giant pleads with him and says, "Oh no, great king, if only I could learn of your wisdom and bring it to the land of the giants, we would be peaceful and prosperous like you." And so the king gives in to his pride and allows the giant in. And they throw a big feast, and in the middle of dinner, the giant gets up and walks to the other side of the table and picks up the king and devours him. Now, Jack and his mother escape through a series of tunnels that are conveniently provided for this story. And Jack's first memory is being carried over his mother's shoulder and seeing his father's castle burn to the ground. Now, this is when we typically pick up the story. Jack's about 13, 14 years old, and there's a famine in the land. His mom is entrusting him with a big responsibility to go and bring the cow to the butcher. The butcher's gonna pay him for half and cut up the other half, and they'll be able to survive the famine with the meat and the gold. Jack's very excited about this big responsibility. So on his way, he comes across a con man. And the con man says, "Oh boy, what a lovely cow you have." And Jack says, "Oh yes, I know, I'm bringing it to the butcher. Mom's gonna be so proud of me." And he says, "Oh, she'll be very proud, but not as proud as if you had these magic beans." And Jack's like, "You got magic beans?" And we all know how used car salesmen work. So pretty soon, the con man's walking away with the cow, and Jack's walking away with beans that aren't magic. So Jack comes home and says, "Mother, look at these beans. We'll survive the famine. It'll be so wonderful." And his mother looks at him and looks at the beans and slaps him across the face and says, "You stupid boy, we're going to starve. You will sleep outside tonight." Now Jack is sleeping outside for the first time of his mother's house. And when Jack's asleep, the early version of the story, it's a guardian angel, actually, makes the beanstalk grow. In the Disney version, it would be a fairy godmother. Take your pick. When Jack wakes up, there's a beanstalk. And he decides, having for the first time slept outside of his mother's house, "I'm going to go on an adventure." And he does, and he climbs the beanstalk. He climbs and he climbs, and he gets to the clouds, and sort of like the cloud level in Super Mario Brothers. And he's in the land of the giants. And he walks and he walks and he goes through a forest, and in the forest he finds a castle. And next to the castle, he sees a small house. And he goes into the house, except it's not a house. It's actually like an animal coop. And he sees in the middle is a goose, and it lays golden eggs. Jack's amazed by this, so he brings the goose down, and he's like, "This is so great, my mother will be so pleased." And he brings the goose down the beanstalk and says, "Mother, look at this. It's a goose. It lays golden eggs. We'll never starve. We'll be able to have all the gold we need." And his mother says, "Oh, that's so wonderful. I'm so happy." And they are for a couple years. Jack's 15, 16. He gets a little restless. And he decides, "I'm going to go on another adventure." Goes back up the beanstalk. goes once again to the castle, and this time he goes in. And when he goes into the castle, he's in a great room, and he hears beautiful music, music like he's never heard before. And he goes over, and the music is coming from a harp. And the harp speaks to him, and it speaks to him of wisdom, philosophy, the arts. It knows everything. He asks it any question, and it gives him the answer. Jack's amazed by this, so he says, oh, this will please Mother so well. And so he brings the harp back down the beanstalk and says, Mother, Mother, look at this harp. It speaks wisdom, philosophy. I ask it any question, and it knows the answer. I don't know what the giant called it, but I call it Google. And Mother says, oh, that's so wonderful. We'll be so happy with Google. And sure enough, they are for a couple of years. Jack's 17, 18 years old, and he decides, I'm going to go on another adventure. And this time, he goes up, and he goes into the castle, and he realizes that he's not alone. The candles are lit, and the giant is home. And he waits, and he sees the giant. And he sees the giant go and sit on its bed. And as it sits on its bed, it takes off a necklace. And on the necklace is his father's crown. And Jack realizes that this is the giant who killed his father. And that is his father's crown. And it's not right for the giant to have his father's crown. So Jack waits until the giant's asleep, climbs up the nightstand, takes the father's crown off, and as he jumps down, he creates a big noise, and the giant wakes up and doesn't see him, but smells the air and says, I know your scent, boy, and I will devour you like I devoured your father. Big chase scene. Steven Spielberg would direct. And Jack runs down the beanstalk. The giant's chasing him, grabs the axe, cuts down the beanstalk. The giant falls to its death, creating a big cavern, which is another story for another time. And Jack is able to be happy. He's able to be happy and content because Jack has regained his father's crown, and he is king of himself. So, there are 3 takeaways from this. The first, and before we really go into this, the first is understand that Jack's mother, it's simply gender specific. Actually, his mother refers to any woman that actually Jack is trying to please throughout his life. That moms and dads in fairy tales simply represent a gender specific character for them. So, the first is that he has to leave mom's house. In order to go on an adventure, there has to be some form of separation for Jack. And for boys becoming men, actually there also has to be a separation. A separation of having their own source of identity. And so, which brings us to our second, is that the gold and knowledge don't equal happiness for Jack or actually for the mom. And this is an important part, is that actually Jack is trying to constantly please his mom, just as actually boys are constantly trying to please the women in their lives. And that actually money's not going to do it, knowledge isn't going to do it, no matter how good of an artist he is, it's not going to do it. And Jack actually isn't able to do it through these things. And so which leads us to our last, which is that he's not able to actually do this until he reclaims his father's crown. That actually Jack, when he reclaims his father's crown, does it not because he's trying to please his mother, but actually because he believes it's the right thing to do. And then actually when boys start to act based on the right thing to do and not trying to please others, they become men. And that's what fairy tales can tell us about becoming men.